What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith, but yet another Locked On crossover, back-to-back days. Of course, we were on with Connor Thomas yesterday previewing the World Series. I thought that was a very fun episode, a very good change of pace for Pittsburgh Pirates fandom a little bit to see another PA team do well. But on today's episode, if you can't tell by the background, today's episode is all about Oneil Cruz. And I thought Lindsay Crosby of Locked On MLB Prospects was the perfect guy to come on and talk about this. And I think it's great that as soon as I said your name, I hear sirens outside of my house. So that was great entrance there for Lindsay. But we're going to talk about his 2022 season, a little bit about what he can improve on, what he did good, what he did bad, how we think he's going to perform in 2023, and my one big question on if he could be MLB's next superstar. There's a potential there. I think he has it. But Lindsay, how are you today? How are things rolling for you in the offseason and with all the players playing wherever they're playing right now?
So right now I've got Arizona Fall League, so I do have some guys in competition, but it's all very small sample sizes. So I previewed the World Series myself on Wednesday's show, but from the perspective of how did you build these teams? How did you get, like how many prospects did you promote into the team? How did you acquire the talent you have? So it's that fun off-season stuff of trying to figure out what's going on and then looking forward to the last bit of baseball we have. It starts on Friday.
Yes, and it's interesting that my boss is a big Yankees fan and has a major issue with the fact that the World Series could go all the way up to November 5th or 6th, I believe, which is just very odd for baseball. And I think it was actually good for baseball that the Yankees and the Phillies didn't make it because I can only imagine how Mother Nature would have been in that series between New York and Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
But Oneil Cruz, all year for me personally, especially in my comments, in the group chat that we have from yourself, from myself, all year this was about Oneil Cruz. It really was. It was about when is he going to make his long anticipated 2022 debut. Of course, we got the short cameo in 2021 that gave us a taste of it. He stays in the minors for what I would say way too long. And you can only imagine where this team would have been win total wise if he would have been there sooner. But then he comes up, and the impact and the way he plays was just immediate. Hard hit balls, throwing the ball very, very fast. Defense kind of sporadic, but the dude was just absolutely awesome. There were, of course, his downfalls, but if you had to put 2022 in a microcosm for Oneil Cruz, what do you think would be the best way to describe it, Lindsay?
The best way to talk about what Oneil Cruz did in 2022 is to look at, we saw the promise of what Oneil Cruz could be. We saw the work you still have to do, right? And if you go and you look at StatCast for Oneil Cruz, and if you've never done this, you really should go do it because it looks like it looks like a Christmas tree. There's a ton of red and there's a ton of blue and there's nothing in the middle. Max exit velocity. He had the hardest hit ball in baseball this year, 122.4. It's right above my head here on the graphic.
Yes.
His average exit velo was 91st percentile. His sprint speed, 98th percentile. Barrel rate, 96th percentile. Just so many things that he did very, very well at. And then the flip side of that is his whiff rate. His swing and miss was one of the highest in Major League Baseball. I want to say it was 37% strikeout rate. Outs above average, 3rd percentile. Strikeout rate, 1st percentile. Expected batting average, 17th percentile. Like, the Oneil Cruz experience is a roller coaster. And when it's on, it's on. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you can see the promise. And the real question is, how much can he improve off of what he did this year to be to reach that superstar status that he has the potential of hitting?
Yes, and again, for somebody like me who watched him every day, you end up covering the entire farm system, so you can't just watch Oneil Cruz every day like I can. There were those moments where Oneil Cruz for 2 weeks was a unstoppable force of nature and was on MLB.com's Twitter every single day doing something crazy. I still also love the idea that the hardest hit ball in baseball this year, and I believe in StatCast history, if I'm not mistaken, was a single off the Roberto Clemente wall because Ronald Acuna Jr. got the ball in like lightning fast. And he didn't really have a choice, because if he didn't get it in lightning fast, it would have been a triple. And I don't remember the exact number, but I think they said it would have been a home run in like 24 of the 30 major league ballparks. So it was an awesome thing to see and an awesome thing to watch. But as you mentioned, I could see where Pirates fans and media and reporters get upset a little bit with the hype that surrounded Oneil Cruz, because, again, it's great that he has all those big percentiles in the hitting department, but you can't have a 30% whiff rate on strikeouts and expect to be any kind of major league good player. Now, obviously, this was his first full season seeing major league pitching, and nobody really ever comes out of the woodwork and just figures it out right away. There are some players that do. Mike Trout even struggled a little bit when he first got here, but found it down the stretch. Nobody really ever figures it out. Maybe even through next year, he might still see things that he still needs to work on, and albeit that's fine, because it's only going to be his second full year as a Major League Baseball player. And I would say that, based off of what I watched again, and I talked to you about this before we started recording, the biggest one was swinging at changeups and breaking balls low. He was absolutely terrible at it. It was something that he fixed a little bit, like he would stop doing it, but also I think would get more infuriating is, I think he would get in his own head and he would swing at those, and then there'd be that fastball right down the pipe that he should be crushing for 450 feet that he would just look at. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then the arm strength thing, it's cool that you could throw the ball 100 miles per hour from shortstop, but you put it in the first baseman's glove first before you worry about that. And that's an adjustment that he made over time, I think, where he finally realized, okay, that's Albert Pujols running the first base. I don't need to throw the ball 1,000,000 miles per hour to get him out. I could take my time, get through my cadence, do all of that stuff. Where, with all the discrepancies that you mentioned, especially from the StatCast point of view, where do you think his biggest improvement needs to come from?
So I think we need to understand that you're always going to have swing and miss in Oneil Cruz's game. Part of it is guys don't significantly improve at swing and miss as they spend more time in Major League Baseball. You can have incremental changes, a couple percent here or there, but for the most part, you are who you are. And with Oneil Cruz, you have the added issue of a lot of his swing and miss is mechanical. He's 6'7". He has incredibly long levers. And so there is just a lot of moving parts to that swing to get the bat in the zone. So you're always going to have some of that swing and miss. But I think you touched on the changeups low. If you look at his performance against individual pitches, fastballs, batting average of 285, slugging of 563. Dude can handle a fastball. Velocity doesn't matter. Off-speed pitches, batting average of 222, slugging of 556. Changeups can get him from time to time, but when he can get one, he can get one. I noticed the times that I did see him, and some in the minor leagues as well, breaking pitches in the bottom third of the strike zone, and then breaking pitches that break out of the zone seemed to be a particular struggle, at least at the minor league level when I watched him. He was batting 168 on breaking pitches, slugging of 252. So even when he did get a bat on it, he wasn't making quality contact. So for me, the big thing is going to be pitch recognition. Understand, when you're 6'7", everything is going to be a low pitch for you. Everything is going to be low in the zone. But being able to pick it up out of the hand and understanding this is going to be a strike, this is going to be a ball, seeing the spin out of the hand, that's something I think that Oneil Cruz can work on. And when he does, can make significant improvements to the swing and miss and incremental improvements to the strikeout rate.
All right. So we talked a lot about 2022. But what I can say about Oneil Cruz, and I think this is going to be a phenomenal lead-in to speak on myself here, so enjoy this one, guys. Of anything on the Pirates, I do think that we can safely say that Oneil Cruz is going to be on this team for quite some time. And that means today's episode is brought to you by Simply Safe. As everyone knows, athletes rise and fall in the ranks, but when it comes to saving money, Simply Safe is always on top. And right now, you can save big with Simply Safe Home Security. They're giving listeners 40% off their advanced security system. Simply Safe was just named the best home security of 2022 by US News. I use it. I love it. You'll love it too. And because it's Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I live about 10 minutes from a downtown city that is flooded with drunk tourists all the time. So do you really think I'm not going to have a security system of some sort, even in a small studio apartment? No. And Simply Safe is awesome. I mean, it alerts me if a lizard runs into the camera. So that's how precise Simply Safe is. And with 24/7 professional monitoring, when a threat is detected, Simply Safe's monitoring professionals promptly contact you and dispatch first responders to your home, even if you're away or unable to respond. 24/7 professional monitoring costs under $1 per day. That's less than half the cost of ADT's traditional professional install plans. Simply Safe also blankets your home with protection with advanced sensors in every room, like I just mentioned, window and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, and smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, even a lizard, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/lockedonmlb. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's Simply Safe. It's SIMPLI, safe.com. Go today. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So again, on the Oneil Cruz thing from last year, to just kind of wrap that up, the dude was an enigma, as you mentioned. I mean, he really was. And it was just, you never knew when he came up to the plate or was in the field what was going to happen next. I mean, you could go from the hardest hit ball he had this year, hitting one into the Allegheny this year, the sprint speed that he showed, not only running to first, but also stealing. He did not have that bad of a steal rate, I don't believe. He didn't do it that often, but he was pretty good at it, and you knew he was there. And again, you mentioned the guy is 6'7" and is likely going to put on weight at some point. I mean, he's a skinny dude. He really is. And to have that kind of power with that frame isn't surprising. But if you looked at Oneil Cruz and saw how tall he was, and then see how, like, he's not a big muscly guy. So I have the picture above Lindsay's head of him and Aaron Judge, where I don't think he's going to get to Aaron Judge levels of, like, bulkiness and stuff like that. I do think he will eventually have to do something in that department just to stay off the injured list. But moving into 2023, I think it's pretty clear that Oneil Cruz is one of the pillars of this Pirates team that has been bad for quite some time now. And his expectation was there already. The expectations for him are there already. Obviously, he's going to be on the team to start 2023, but I have an interesting question. Do you think he is the starting shortstop, or do you think they move him to DH with the new banning of the shift rules for 2023, basing this off of his defensive numbers where, as you mentioned before we came on, he actually did not have a positive outs above average this year?
Yeah, he graded out at -9 outs above average. And I think as of right now, there's alternatives to play DH. It's harder to find someone at shortstop who has that kind of arm and has that kind of speed. And even if you end up moving him to third base, he did play, I think, one in the outfield. Even if you end up moving him, I do think he can give you positive value on defense. A lot of the issues on defense seem to be, and you touched on it earlier, seem to be one, timing, not necessarily having the internal clock on this is how long I have to make this throw. I don't need to rush this, or I do need to rush this. And you see the accuracy that comes along, like the accuracy issues that come along with that. And then I seem to notice, and this carries over from the minors a bit, that he sometimes struggled a bit laterally. His success rate was better towards third than towards second. So, when he's trying to move towards second, he would have, he didn't have as great of an expected success rate in fielding balls. Obviously, without the shift, he's going to have to do more moving towards second. Now, I will say with the shift restrictions and the way they are, he only had 51 defensive plays where he was lined up on the second base side of the bag. So it's not like it's going to change a lot. I mean, he spent, what was it? He spent somewhere around 70 plate appearances lined up the middle towards the second base bag, and he can still do that with the shift restriction. I actually think he's pretty good up the middle, and the stats bear that out. He had, I think, an 88% success rate when he was lined up the middle and the ball came up the middle. So I keep him in the field if it's me, knowing that you do always have the fallback of you can move him to the outfield if you determine the defense isn't good enough. But I think he has the tools to get there.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because when I've been doing my player reviews, the last one I did was on the middle infield, and I wanted to give Cruz his own episode where I talked about Kevin Newman, who was a Gold Glove finalist last year, came back this year. His bat was actually a little bit better this year when he came back from the injured list. He's going to probably start at second base, and then you have Rodolfo Castro, who's a guy who doesn't have the same measurements, obviously, as Cruz and isn't as good defensively in some departments. So I would think he will probably slot in as the primary DH guy. The only reason I have the kind of the stoppage on him moving to the outfield is because of what the Pirates are going to have next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people forgot that Brian Reynolds is Brian Reynolds. He's not going to, if Cruz is in the outfield, he's not going to go to center field. We can go ahead and just say that right now. He would be a corner outfielder, but you're already including, you're going to have Jack Sawinski. Cal Mitchell's going to be there again, probably in some capacity. Caden Smith and Jigba got hurt earlier this year, so they still need a quality look at him. That's also including the fact that you're going to have Matt Frazier probably come up at some point next year. Connor Scott, who you acquired in the Jacob Stallings trade last year, will probably get a look this year. And they experimented with Marcano and G1 Bay out there. So I'm not saying that they won't experiment with it again at some point. I just don't think that it's a primary fix for him if he does go out there. But I've been wrong about this before. I mean, look at Mookie Betts. A lot of people were kind of hesitant with him moving to the outfield at first, and he became one of the better right fielders in all of baseball over the last couple of years. So,
and now apparently it might be moving back to second base to accommodate Aaron Judge from reports that are coming out pretty early.
Yeah, I did see this, and I was like, wow, this is insane. But it also, I don't think there's any real negative here if his defense it doesn't really ever get better, because, I mean, as you mentioned, you now have the fallback of the DH. And even if but that's a good thing to also have, because if you really think about it, Lindsay, if he does make the move to the outfield or stays at short and only gets better defensively, that's a major positive. Because now you have a guy who's 6'7", has one of the best exit velos in all of baseball, and can play defense. That is a crazy scenario to think about.
That is the situation where you're looking at, okay, is this guy an all-star going forward? Is he one of the stars of baseball? And the thing about the middle infield is, the thing that I'd like to say a lot on my show is, depth will always work itself out. Don't worry if you have one more guy than you need, because guys will need rest, guys will get hurt, guys will slump, and depth will take care of itself. So knowing that you have, you have Brian Hayes third, you've got Cruz and Newman, and Rodolfo Castro all competing for playing time, you'll find it. You'll figure it out. No worries. But from what I see of Oneil Cruz and his work ethic, I feel like he's the type of player who is going to get better. He is going to take the instruction. And we even saw it later in the season. Just having watched him in the minors for a few years, I've seen him fundamentally get better. When you have the arm talent like an Oneil Cruz does, it's very easy for a lot of minor leaguers to just do it all with the arm. And we've seen Oneil Cruz get better fundamentally at being able to obviously make the play and then set his feet and make a throw, versus all upper body and arm get it in there. So we've seen him improve. I feel like that's going to continue, and I expect him to be the opening day shortstop next year.
Yeah, and I don't think that anybody's really expecting anything different outside of him starting there, at least to begin the year. But then if some of those same problems trickle back over from this year with the defense, I do think there's a real conversation to have at sliding Newman to shortstop, Castro to second, and Cruz to DH. That's what I think it could eventually be. This is also me speaking in confidence that Kevin Newman is going to be here. He's been a guy who's been a trade market piece for the last 2 years and has somehow still stayed here. I mean, even the Yankees have looked at him. The Mets looked at him at one point. The Phillies, who were just in the World Series, looked at him not too long ago. The Mariners looked at him. There's a lot of teams that have looked at Kevin Newman. So that's just me assuming that he will be here. Who knows? Now, with Oneil Cruz as well, and this is getting more into just a thought process of opinion, obviously has not received an extension yet, hasn't received like the Wander Franco contract, the Julio Rodriguez contract. And I'm going to just go out and tell you right now, he hasn't deserved a Wander Franco or Julio Rodriguez-esque extension. But the Pirates did something very out of the ordinary, out of what they usually do, and extended Ke'Bryan Hayes at the beginning of this year for 8 years, $70 million. So he's here for a long time. Is this something that you think they should explore with Oneil Cruz this offseason to go ahead and say, hey, we believe in you, kid. You're going to be here for a very long time. Sign this 6-year, I'd say in the realm of $50 million maybe. Sign this contract with incentives and come and play for this team for the next 6 years.
So the heart says, yes, go ahead and sign him. The head says, make sure you've answered the defensive question. Make sure that you figured out either we think he can stick it short, or if we end up having to move him, we can move him to somewhere else on the field. Because the worst case scenario is you sign him to that long-term deal, and then you have to either you continue to play him in the field if he's not good, hoping he gets better to justify the money, or you're paying all that money to a DH, right? So part of me says work with him on defense and be prepared, have an idea of what you want the extension to be. And if next season starts off, he looks like he's some of these both offensive and defensive issues, and it looks like the team is building around him where you can contend with him, then go ahead and make it over. Because, I mean, there's things that he does very well outside of just the ball hard and hitting the ball hard. The average MLB baseball player who had 360 plate appearances, that's how many he had this year, hit 39 RBIs. 54 is what Oneil Cruz did, and that is, I mean, so obviously like there's an ability to be clutch there. He had a 10-game on base streak this year. He had a 7-game hit streak this year, and the team went 31-56 in the games that he played in, but that wasn't his fault. He was additive to the point of, I think he was worth over 2 WAR in his limited time up at the bigs. So he makes your team better. If you know that you can contend and that you have answered the defensive question, then middle of next season, early next season, make the offer, lock him up, make sure you buy some of those free agent years out to keep the cost control.
Yeah, and that's where I think I am. If they do it, obviously I'm going to be happy. I'm like, okay, I can go buy my Oneil Cruz jersey now. That's all I'm waiting on. I haven't bought it yet because I don't know when they're going to extend him or not. Because Brian
he's been
Reynolds,
traded once, yeah,
he's been traded already by the Dodgers, so you never know. But Brian Reynolds is on that same trajectory where he had extension talks last year. They bought out his arbitration years, which is like, I don't count that as an extension. I liked when people said, oh, this is an extension. No, it's not. It's buying out arbitration years to make sure he's getting paid what he's worth. With Oneil Cruz moving forward, though, it is very interesting because Gary Morgan, who I usually have on every Monday, brought this question up that he thinks the Pirates may, and this is a weird take, but maybe they gave Hayes the extension too early. Because Ke'Bryan Hayes is a phenomenal baseball player. Personally, I think he should win the Gold Glove at third base this year. I think it's going to get given to Nolan Arenado as a prize is not winning the MVP. Personally, because I think Goldschmidt will probably win the MVP in the National League. I wonder how Pirates fans feel about it right now because, again, he's a great player, but he has his injury issues. He has issues in terms of hitting the baseball, which you already knew. Would you rather have Cruz have the extension or Hayes? I would still say Hayes just because Hayes is a more polished product of what you know he is. Oneil Cruz, again, we got to see him this year, and it felt like an eternity. Like, it felt like we got a big sample size of Oneil Cruz. It was only 4 months. It was not that long of a time. And as I love to add to everybody, nobody comes up here and is perfect right away. Perfect example, and Lindsay will love this example. Former top 100 prospect Mitch Keller, who looked unplayable for the last 2 or 3 years, and now this year comes out, has the lowest ERA of his career, the most innings of his career, the most strikeouts of his career, the least amount of walks in his career, and the least amount of home runs given up this year. Oneil Cruz is only going to continue to get better. I think that's why I asked the extension question, because the Pirates don't spend money. So if he's only going to continue to get better, wouldn't you rather sign him now, obviously with wanting the defensive issues fixed, over 2 years from now when he's making all-star games and maybe even getting into MVP conversations, possibly if his potential does rise that high?
Yeah, I mean, if he puts everything together, then you can't afford him. Like that's the situation you're in. And so the question is, how confident are you that he's going to put it all together? The more confident that you are, the bigger the urgency to go out and to sign the contract. And an example of a team who does that a lot, the Atlanta Braves. I mean, you're there in Georgia. The Atlanta Braves, obviously, they watched what Spencer Strider did. They said, yeah, if, we need to sign him long term before he gets too expensive for us to re-sign. Same thing with Michael Harris. Same thing with Austin Riley. The thing that's hard with me is I do think there would be an argument to put Oneil Cruz at third base if it wasn't for the fact you have Ke'Bryan Hayes.
Yeah.
And so if you're open to moving Oneil Cruz and making room for him in right field, and say shortstop, right field, DH is the third spot, if you're willing to commit to regular play time for him in right field, then go ahead and make the extension now. Go ahead and do the extension. Do it before he pops, so to speak, and save a little bit of money as long as you get out into his free agent years. I could see an 8-year, $100 million thing, something like that. That would put him just over the AAV of what Ke'Bryan Hayes is getting. I think Ke'Bryan Hayes made $10 million this year. That puts him just over that.
8 years, 70 million. So just a little bit under 10.
There you go.
I believe.
So puts him a little bit over it, and one, solidifies the left side of your infield, but then two, gives you that, you can build around those guys, and anything they return above that is excess value. And that's ultimately how lower revenue franchises can contend for championships, is to get excess value off of players that are signed to long-term deals.
Awesome. So to end today's episode, Lindsay, I have a wonderful question for you. Of course,
Okay.
you know me and my questions. Going into 2023, what do you describe the ceiling that Oneil Cruz could have, but also potentially the floor that Oneil Cruz could have, just to give Pirates fans and myself an idea of where I need to have my thought process on what to expect from him next season?
Ooh, okay. All right. So let's do the floor first, because that's the not fun one. I think the floor is, take what he did this year and think about MLB teams having a full offseason to watch his film and see his struggles with changeups, see his struggles with spin down and away, changeups low and in, and them focusing on that. So think about that situation. You look at the 233 batting average dropping to, just under 200. You look at this, the slugging, I think would still, as long as he's making contact, it's going to be hard contact. He's always, to me, going to have a slugging that's at least over 400. But that's kind of your worst case scenario. And then you continue to see the defense struggle as far as throwing errors and as far as not necessarily getting to balls up the middle when he's lined up in a normal shortstop position. But the ceiling of Oneil Cruz is probably the highest of anybody in this organization. The ceiling of Oneil Cruz is, imagine that he's a little bit better with that initial read and reaction off the bat, especially up the middle. He solves the throwing issues, and so he gets to above average defensively. I think that's probably the ceiling. Probably not a plus defender, but an above average defender at short with a cannon. And then offensively, if he gets that better pitch discernment coming out, ball coming out of the hand, I could see a best case scenario of 280, 350, 550 for a slash line. And I think Oneil Cruz has the talent to be, if everything clicks, you're looking at a guy who could contend for a 30-30 season, or maybe even potentially a 40-40 season if everything were to click. I don't think the steals will ever get that high. We saw steal, 11 times this year?
Yeah.
But I think it was like 11 to 16. But 30-30 or a 40-30 absolutely feels like it's possible if everything clicks for Oneil Cruz.
And that is a welcome sight to hear, because Pirates fans for a long time have been waiting for that superstar-esque player. And it seems like they're getting on the right trajectory at this point. I mean, you look at
Mhm.
the roster construction of how the team will be built in 2023 pending the offseason. It feels a lot better every year. Now, of course, the wins and losses haven't been there, but at least they've been with players that you can at least expect are going to be here for a while. This episode was amazing, Lindsay. Guys, make sure you go check out Lindsay Crosby over at Locked On MLB Prospects. He's covering, as he mentioned earlier, the Arizona Fall League all year. Probably going to be covering more other minor league stuff that's all going on throughout the entire offseason, as well as covering the offseason from the basis of where some of these marquee free agents began their career. Sure, he'll be
Mhm.
talking about that as well. On tomorrow's episode, for me, we'll be talking about Key Brian Hayes a little bit in terms of where he needs to improve, what his kind of trajectory is going to be moving into 2023. With that said, guys, thank you so much. My name is Ethan Smith of the Locked On Pirates podcast. That is Lindsay Crosby at Crosby Baseball at Locked On MLB Prospects. Make sure you also check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. We had Connor Thomas and H-Town Wheelhouse and Eric Hausman of Locked On Astros and Locked On Phillies on there the last couple of days previewing the World Series. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you on the flip side.